Well, good afternoon, good evening, my friends from all over the world. I want to just thank you for spending every Friday night with me. You know how much I love this, and I couldn't think of a better thing to do. And yes, I am a complete nerd. What can I say? But there's so many exciting things happening right now in the world of UFOs. I am sure that most of you watched the briefing on Tuesday. That was really a fascinating thing, and I look forward to seeing comments in chat about that. And also, I'm looking forward to talking to my guest this evening about that because he has done substantial work, very credible and important work, in my opinion, on the Nimitz encounters and much, much more. So, this will be a fun show. I also want to say that next Friday, depending on how things roll, I might be doing a show from a place next to Skinwalker Ranch. So we are going to see, I have an invitation to go up there and a press pass, and hopefully I can do that and go up and hang out with my friends and interview the witnesses that I've been interviewing for years in the area. Skinwalker Ranch is near and dear to my heart, and so this should be fun. It might be also exciting to see some of the speakers at the conference, so I will keep you posted. And then the following week, on January 3rd, I have Chris Rotowski, who will be on the show, and so that will be a lot of fun to talk about Canada, to talk about his research and some of the new things taking place. So I appreciate that. And I just want to, and sorry, Mario, I will get you the password, but I want to thank specifically Mario for always being here, being my right hand man and friend and supporter. He is here tirelessly every Friday. I don't know how he does it, but he's a brave soul and a kind man. And I want to say hi to Tracy and Peter and Drew and Lord Ludacris and everybody. Happy Friday, you guys. I hope you are all safe and happy and healthy. Make sure you get in and subscribe, like the show, and if you can, please become a Patreon. And I want my guest this evening has graciously done that for a long, long time to help keep the show on the air. I appreciate all of that because this does cost a little bit of money to do all of this. But on that note, I'm going to bring in Dave because Dave is, in my opinion, Dave, welcome to the show again. It's so nice to see you. And I just have to say, you're, first of all, everything, you look great. Your background, I strive to be like you when I grow up, handle my own production.
I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd too. Got a camera and a light.
It's wonderful. You look fantastic. And you've been, and I want to just tell people, for those people watching the show who don't know about you, you're an Emmy Award-winning producer and a cinematographer, which is amazing in and of itself. You research and investigate UAV systems and UAP, and you really get in there and do work interrogating witnesses and making sure that you can go in and verify what they're saying. You've done a lot of not grammar requests, but FOIA requests over the years, and also have the skills to do graphics, which can create some of the things that the witnesses were seeing and help put it in a different perspective. And I think that that is really such an added bonus. And you received an Emmy Award for craft camera on the Travel Channel's Water's Edge at the Bahamas. How much fun! And received an Emmy Award for the editing of a PBS documentary, Children of the Fourth World. And so, what was that about? Let me ask you.
Well, my partner, John Bafar, spent decades following the story of a young American woman who was 18 years old from Rockville, Maryland, who on her own drove her VW van to Guatemala because she wanted to do something with her life, and was sort of directed to the city dump where she encountered people that lived there and basically recycled, and they lived in the garbage in the dump in cardboard houses. And she, over the years since that time, she's been able to form a school called Mi Refugio, and helps bring these kids out of the dump and to provide them with vocational education, and helps them get a leg up and get out of that lifestyle.
Wow,
It's an amazing story.
fascinating. And you've done some amazing, just really incredible things over the years, and you've gone to some exotic places, and I want to just also mention that you did a Travel Channel's show, Freeze Frame, which was a series on wildlife encounters in Alaska, History Channel's Fireboats of 911, and the Nazi plan to bomb New York. And so, okay, tell us a little bit about that, because that intrigues me.
Well, I was lucky because there was a aviation military historian that was from this town that I lived in Florida, and he approached us with some of the work that he did on these secret weapons that the Germans were developing during World War II, and we created some 3D graphics again, kind of going back to that theme, and we pitched that to the History Channel, some of these wonder weapons that the Nazis were developing, and we ended up getting greenlit to do a film. We ended up traveling all over Germany, going to Peenemünde and some of these places. Basically, the story was of these three German rocketeers that were trying to develop weaponry that could actually reach the United States. That Germans were doing that. So that was the theme of that film.
Wow. Okay, what a fun life. I mean, but it's hard though. I mean, doing what you do, I mean, you're working 12-hour days, in grueling conditions a lot of times. And I know from my friends that are in the film industry, it's not an easy thing. And there's a reason why, you need to take time off and regroup. And to also pitch a series and to actually land the series, that in and of itself is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it's not like I'm doing those types of History Channel shows every day. That was, I think, 99 or something like that. So, they're sprinkled out through my career in television production. I'm not doing it every day. And the average grind, I was telling Erica that, like, today I was down in Naples filming a doctor about cardiology. So that's kind of the normal thing that I'm doing, not the Nazi secret weapons, but...
But you know what? That's interesting in and of itself.
It is, yeah. It's always something different in this business, that's for sure.
How fun. Well, I appreciate you doing that all day and coming on UFO Classified and things. It's always such a great joy to have you on the show and to hear your work, because like I mentioned in the opening, you go above and beyond what most people do, and you get in there and you do the FOIA requests and all of that. And that's really important. I think most of the time people are just looking at the internet and reading a story and saying, oh, well, Jeremy Corbell said this and this person said that, and therefore this makes a credible case. And we've seen that so much, like with the MJ-12 documents for decades. It's even though there are people that have done tremendous research debunking MJ-12, people just want to get on and kind of glom onto the new bright shiny object, and they're not really doing the work themselves and also understanding the sources that are out there on the internet who are purposefully manipulating the subject for their own gain.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, when I was a field investigator with Mutual UFO Network back in like 91, I was like, man, I love this idea that I can go out and do something and find something out myself, that I don't have to have somebody tell me. And in this field of study is one of those things. So you could have the government tell you something or another reporter explain something to you, but it really is where you can go out and use the FOIA to find out information. And it's empowering. I mean, I only started doing FOIA stuff probably around 2017. I had never done it before, but it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. And it's free for the most part, so anyone can do it. And I encourage everybody that if you're curious about something with our government and you'd like to find details, try it. It's not that hard.
And so how backed up are they? Because you hear stories. I hear John Greenwald, who is the master of the FOIA, and things that you can put in a FOIA request, and in some cases it can take years to get the information back.
Yeah, I think that it depends on the department that you're trying to get information from and what the types of requests. If it's a complex request, it's going to take a lot more time and so on, and you might get put into a queue. In the case of some of the stuff that I've been doing, like for instance, I FOIA'd the U.S. Marine Corps about this incident that I wrote about last month, and they responded to me within like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So
Wow.
It didn't take long at all. Yeah.
That's really surprising. I mean, are you on the possible spy list? No.
They didn't find anything, so maybe that's why it's like no records found. Sorry, like that's kind of sometimes what happens. But Robert Powell told me that maybe we're on the shit list or whatever. Like that's why now it takes like 2 years for something that took like a month, like a few years back. Now we're on the list or something. It immediately gets sent to Susan Goff's desk. Like,
Wow.
hey,
You know
review
you're
this guy.
living.
No, I don't know.
Well, and there's so much going on, I think, with around all of this and some of the characters that have come forward in the field with questionable backgrounds. And then, it is a burden on a system when you are doing a FOIA request. And I know for me, when I've done FOIA requests about specific UFO encounters and trying to obtain FAA data, it is definitely something that I've had to pay for. And so, what have you done a FOIA request that you've had to pay for, and what was that particular circumstance?
No, in fact, for the most part, I believe that they'll give you 2 hours of research for free. So, and if it's going to go beyond that, an X number of pages or something like that, they'll let you know. I usually just, put in my request how much I'm willing to pay. It depends on the case. And there's been a couple where I've even kind of submitted the application as a media requester because I have been doing some work with the Debrief news website. So I can, when I'm looking for it, say, this is for media usage versus just private citizen usage, and I request expedited processing and a waiver of fees and so on. But luckily, I haven't really done anything that complex, and even if it's like a deck log, say, of 400 pages, it has never cost me anything.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, thank you for the tips.
It's most of it's e-docs now, so they don't actually have to like make copies with reams of paper and so on. So maybe that's one of the, in the old days it cost more because of the mailing and all that. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. And I want to, because I've got a new people that are watching the show all the time, and I want to go back, and even though we've done this when you've been on the show before, I want to go back and revisit your history and why you decided that this was such an intriguing topic.
Yeah, I mean, my history basically, was, always being interested in it and, having a bookshelf full of books like many of us and just being kind of a fan of it and reading some of the early works going, back into the 60s and so on were intriguing to me. I can still remember those days reading the first J. Allen Hynek, books and so on going, wow, I can't believe if everyone knew what this guy was saying in all these cases, there would be like, they couldn't deny it anymore. Because everyone, if you ever brought up UFOs, they would just laugh and go, that's silly or whatever. But then, you're like, man, there's like 500 multiple witness cases with radars and everything else. It's not like fake and false. It's like real. And if you really looked at the evidence, you would find out that there's a small percentage of reported sightings that are unknown. And even with sufficient evidence, they can't figure this stuff out. So I think that was the original reason why I was so intrigued with it, because it's such a cool mystery. And then I kind of got out of it. Like I said, in the 90s, I was interested in it. And then I just kind of dropped it for a while. And then in 2017, I kind of came back, and all of a sudden I had this newfound kind of inspiration, and created like 2 or 3 Facebook groups, started doing the Nimitz 3D animations. And I mean, people that knew me back, like for instance, Joe Mergia, like we worked together back in the 90s, and then I just disappeared. He went his way, I went my way. But then 2017, we kind of got back together because it was like, we're both still interested in the same topic that we had discussed many years ago. And I think a lot of people found that same thing, that they revisited it, this one big kind of topics come back, like the New York Times article that reinvigorated us.
And so, as time has worn on and things, I mean, it's the kind of the importance of that. That was pretty historical on for multiple reasons, and it did give us a platform for people to take the subject seriously. But since that initial article, how, in your opinion, do you think things have devolved since that time, as more personalities started speaking more and more frequently and perhaps giving out information that wasn't necessarily verifiable.
Yeah, I mean this community and the UFO topic in general has always sort of been, there's hucksters, I guess you would call them that, and there's showmen, and there's carnival barkers, and there's scientists, and there's more empirically minded, stoic people that maybe aren't very entertaining, So there's this whole array of like cast of characters, and you really do have to think of that like when you're listening to what they're saying and how they're presenting it. Is this information that is being traded as sort of a commodity, or is it something that is more being given from the bottom of their hearts and they're really open to giving it and sharing it? And I think that for me anyways, I can kind of tell when people are playing a game versus this is coming from the bottom of their hearts, and that they're not trying to manipulate information in some way. And the government does that too, I think. So it's not just the public. You see the same thing happening. It's hard to spot, I think, when it's coming from our government. But how do you know if what they're telling you is the straight, honest truth, and they say don't know anything, or they're not revealing it because they don't want to tell you? I don't know.
Well, and I think it's so, and I mean, obviously there are reasons of national security that they would not want to divulge information and shouldn't, and I'm very grateful for that. But then, you do have people in the UFO community who are, and I use that term very loosely, but that are putting out more false information just to sell books or to get invited on the lecture circuit to, or because they've got ego problems and they need to be, they need to get a pat on the back and things. And, for me, I would hope that at some point in time after 70 years, that there would be a core group in the community that would say, okay, we need to stand up for good research. We need to stand up for ethical behavior. We need to do all of these things in order for the subject to become credible. And I think that's, it's like we've got this opportunity now where, again, you've got people that are being briefed, and you had what happened Tuesday, and yet then you've got other people that are coming out and, hey, I've got more fake videos for you. And even at the conference next weekend in Vernal, Utah, you've got the Cousins brothers, who are notorious for creating fake UFO videos, who are there, on the same ticket as Avi Loeb from Harvard, and they're promoting their new movie, and yet they're, where there seems to be a huge disconnect there. And could there be potentially a conference that would actually have people that are credible? I don't see that. Even I hate to say this, but with SCU too, and I like a majority of what they're doing, but for them to continually invite somebody like Hal Puthoff to speak at the conference, when Hal Puthoff has been questioned since the 70s about some of the things he's been involved with, some of the hoaxed UFO, Serpo, I mean, different things, the characters he's run with, Kid Green and so forth, and then also the gyroscope all of that they were involved with. And excuse me, I'm on a long-winded rant here.
Yeah, the Firmage Project, right?
But the Firmage Project that was actually, Brandon Fugel was head of motion sciences, and Fugel was right there with, Kelleher and Kit Green and all of these people, but yet everybody's kind of saying, oh no, Firmage was such a bad, despicable guy. But, who's got the money now? So at what point do we have that type of standard? And how can we make this subject more respectable, instead of having a brief moment where you've got the media and the public looking at this and asking questions, and then you've got the usual cast of characters coming in and diminishing the subject because of the cases or claims that they're making?
It's a real problem. I mean, I see what you mean, and I think that every time there's a really big story that breaks in ufology that the mainstream media picks up, they go to there's these go-to people that I think they're in their the news assignment editors' Rolodexes, and they have these personas that they go to. And sometimes it does make me cringe a little bit, but I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I know that there's publicity seekers that are promoting stuff because it's a career, whether they're a professional author or filmmaker or lecture circuit person, they're going to be promoting themselves so that when these stories and news media do arrive, that they're the first ones on the deck to get a call and comment on this stuff. I'm not sure, like, how does the general public and the audience discern what is good information and what maybe has a slant to it or has an ulterior motive behind the scenes? It's a real challenge, especially if you don't know anything about this topic or who these people are. If someone seems to have credentials, then you're going to listen to them and with an open mind, hopefully. And, you may say, okay, well, that's true. He's speaking the truth. But in essence, it could be something that's skewed in a way that is beneficial to the person. So I think it is a problem. I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know how we police the community as participants. And I'm guilty that I think that I've kind of ignored it. I kind of just said, look, I'm going to just go and do my own thing. And because again, I think everybody can. I'm going to do FOIAs. I'm going to do my own research and try to find answers. And hopefully I don't come off that way that, I'm trying to skew information or try to present something. And I don't, with some of the people that you mentioned from, the OSAP and the Bigelow group and the Earth Tech and all that, I don't really know. It's always kind of been a mystery to me with those people and what they were doing and the CIA and so on. And again, I don't know, Eric.
I know it is really interesting as you get sucked into these narratives, and then it's like I'm going to do some digging, and I think I'm really cool, and I'm looking at this article online where Pandolfi's bashing, Kit Green, and you've got all of this blah blah blah, and then you've got the aviary, which as I sit back now and look at that, how stupid. I mean, that's embarrassing. Here we've got these guys, they're named after birds, and we take that seriously. It's just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I've learned so much, and I am the first person to say, yes, I believed somebody who was talking about a shape-shifting werewolf. Yes, I believed in, I went down the rabbit hole of A, B, C, and D, but I'm here to say that publicly. I will make mistakes. Anybody in this subject will continue to make mistakes, but it's just a matter, as to whether they are going to acknowledge that and move forward or dig their heels into the sand and talk about Ebens and different things. It's just, it's such a complex thing.
Well, I think that you should be the one that I think that you're the one that can go and basically point these out to everybody and question these narratives and bring this stuff on your show and let people discuss it, right? I love it.
Think so. And thank you for your support. You're always so kind. I appreciate that. It's definitely been the school of hard knocks for me, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade most of 99% of the experiences I've had for anything, because I've learned. And it's interesting, and you touched on this a little bit a few minutes ago, but it is interesting how you see specific people that will approach you and, oh, we love your work. We're going to give you this insider information, but you can't share it with anybody, wink, wink. And then, we're going to fill you out, profile you, figure out what makes you tick and things. And as a result, I've seen some really nice people that have been fooled into believing or promoting for free some of these people's agendas. And to me, that's really just, it's destructive, and it makes me, as a person with a heart, it makes me angry that people could be so callous as to manipulate somebody who genuinely has the quest for information, and that has maybe potentially had an experience that has traumatized them, or they're looking for answers about, and they want to be empowered, and they get sucked into all of this stuff. And so, as much as I don't want to be the police of the world, it's like I feel some sense of obligation to shine a light on this so other people don't get abused, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I've been approached by people that have had experiences, and when they come to me and they want to talk about it, sometimes I'm thinking there's emotional trauma here and so on. I want to help them in some way. A lot of times they're looking at me to sort of vindicate their experience and show me the pictures they have that they believe are indicative of this experience they had. I don't know how to approach that sometimes, and I think that it's like that's one area in this whole topic that kind of gets shoved off as those like experiencers that have had very unusual personal experiences that might have been very troubling. And what do we do for those people? I mean, that's another question. And I'm hoping that, like as you said, they don't end up going to somebody that then takes advantage of them because they hear the story and it's sensational or something, and then they want to like bring that forward because of that reason. Where in my mind, I'm like, I want to see if there's a psychologist that can help this person, a group or something like that, where they could talk about it that would be positively beneficial to that individual.
Thank you. And that's exactly it. I look at some of the people that have had traumatic experiences, like you say it, are looking for whether real or perceived, or whether they were involved with childhood trauma. There's so much that goes into this, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't have the qualifications, and yet you throw yourself into the UFO community and say, hey, I'm going to file a report with this organization or with this person, and give them everything, all my personal information, and have them decide that, or tell me that I was abducted, and these were the tall, benevolent space brothers from Nazi Germany that are here to save the world, and really can take somebody who's in a delicate state and break that person. I mean, this can be, as you know, a very isolating thing when you have the courage to come forward and say, hey, I had this sighting, I want to know what's up. And then you know, uh, you get suckered into some of these support groups with people that are really cult leaders at the end of the day. And bad things can happen. You can lose your job, you can lose your friends, you can lose your sanity. And so that really is, for me, a very disturbing aspect of this subject that we don't shine a light on often enough.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about healthcare, personal information and information about somebody's, state of being is protected. There's laws about that. But if, on the other hand, if you've had a close encounter or have had these experiences going back to childhood that are, have, emotionally challenged an individual, say, and you're giving that information out to a group that allegedly is going to help you, you're hoping that information remains private, that no one besides the person you gave that information to ever sees that, and the agreement is between you and them. And I know that hasn't always happened, and there's this, kind of, people want this data. They want to, there's different groups that want to study it for whatever reason. And so that particular data, I believe, should remain personal and private between that person, and they should decide if it ever is shared with anyone else.
And thank you. I think that's true. And I think when you submit a report to certain organizations or people, I mean, even this, there's a new group out who is, you can go and look at the data from ABC. And thank you, Matthew, for the donation. Thank you so much. And I'll read your question in a minute. But it's like you see these new databases popping up from people that are coming out of nowhere. And you have to really read the fine print. Okay, if you're getting in here, what rights are you relinquishing? How are they going to be using your data? And even on the Skinwalker Ranch website, now that they've monetized, so you can get in there behind the scenes and see conversations, off the scenes conversations with Dragon and people that, I mean, look at the companies that Adamantium is involved with, and look at what they're asking you to sign away when you get in there and pay to play. So these are some serious concerns.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know for a fact that some of the people that submitted reports about CE3, CE4 events, those databases were sold, and then you had other people making direct calls to these individuals that didn't know that their personal details were shared, and so you have new investigators calling you on the phone or showing up at your door, knocking, asking if they could see whoever about the alien abduction. And I mean, that's crazy. And again, the secrecy stuff, I get it. In entertainment, in television production and creating a mystery, and you're controlling that. Whatever they call it, Oak Island. Like every episode they're going to find something, and they never find anything, but to keep the viewers going. But everyone that's involved can't tell anybody that the next episode that they didn't find the gold, because otherwise it would mess up the theme of the show. So I do get that. But, I mean, it's still a strange place. I know I've never been to Skinwalker. It's almost like now, like, okay, well, if you're a celebrity enough, then eventually you get to go out there, like, as a badge of honor to see if there really is something that's going on there. And your watch stops, and you can say, oh, look, I know it's real now because my phone, like, dialed my doctor when I wasn't, like, touching it or something. So, I don't know.
I know it is really interesting, and I think it's more like, if there was a serious research study underway, it wouldn't be a TV show. It wouldn't be
right.
The directions wouldn't be on Google Maps that you could go up to the front gate and get your selfie there. And I think also, I have to ask you, when you see the formation of specific LLCs like Adamantium and TTSA that were started as and still are entertainment companies, what alarm bells should go off to people specifically? And you know this because you've been in media, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, obviously starting an entertainment company and making TV shows is pretty interesting. And if you do, own the paranormal super Disneyland or whatever they call it, that's a great way to make some bucks or whatever. And I thought that they should, make it a retreat, like a couples retreat or something, and put like some chalets out there where you can go out in the middle of the mesa and toast or whatever at sunset. That would be, I thought they should do that. That would have been a really cool, way to promote it and so on. I mean, a TV show, yeah, TTSA, I mean, that TV show that they did was pretty interesting. I thought they did a really good job, actually. I learned a lot in what they revealed, obviously with Luel Elizondo and Sean Cahill and those guys, that Chris Mellon, that were presenting these cases. And it kind of did end up being a more of a traditional UFO case show, where they would like go and track down some of the best cases that have occurred, military mostly, and then go and examine those. So I did enjoy that part of it. They did a good production job, editing and producing and writing and all that. As far as, the idea that you should invest in a company like that because they're going to reveal something or they're going to produce an anti-gravity spaceship, I might be a little hesitant to drop my retirement funds into that, because it might be a bust in the end, but if you want to see, help them out with the entertainment side of it, and it might be a good investment for you. I think it's all in the product. Sometimes they do kind of present these things differently than what you end up with. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and I did receive some information about TTSA, and that they're pretty far in the hole as of late, which will be interesting to see what happens with that. And I'll have to do a show on that down the line. But I want to ask a question from Matthew Wright. And again, Matthew, thank you for the super chat sticker and donation. Any comment on Elizondo's quote about being ordered to apply CI skills to the ufology community?
I'm not familiar with that quote. I mean, was he basically saying that he was ordered to apply counterintelligence skills to the I'm not exactly. I
Yes.
would have to think
Yeah.
about that.
And I
I
think that
mean,
that was a comment that he made a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken. There's been so much going on, but where he did, go on a show and say that he had been, he was using counterintelligence skills on the UFO community.
yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of that. Obviously, that is his career as a counterintelligence agent. I think that in his thought processes and the way he's looking at information that he's receiving, now, whether he's using that nefariously, again, I couldn't tell you about that. I think if he said that's pretty interesting, I'd like to hear it.
Well, one just never knows.
Yeah, I mean he's a ex special agent. He worked for the Undersecretary of Defense of Intelligence, and he was his career was really intriguing. He's seen a lot of things. Obviously, I mean his main job was trying to prevent foreign adversaries from gaining the upper hand, and that's what he was doing in his career. I think that the guy's a patriot. Personally, I think that he wouldn't be doing something to the American public that would be harmful. I mean, you'd have to convince me of that. So,
And so let me just, because you mentioned the word patriot, and some people believe, that using the word patriot can be used as a racist dog whistle. And we've seen, a lot of people invoking, fellow patriots and things like that, and they are involved in some groups that are pretty questionable. I mean, how do you,
the
where do you go
the
with
way that I would define that would be somebody that say was a former military service member or a military service member, or somebody that basically is just like basically proud American that would defend America and that would say the Pledge of Allegiance and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I guess it's just like saying, "Hey, I'm proud of I'm an American." To me, that's all it means.
Okay. And it is interesting because to other people, that have
Yeah, words get like buzzwords get created that surround other types of meetings, and that's unfortunate.
yeah, it's fascinating. And I wanted to thank Ruodan for the $20 donation. Thank you. That's really, really awesome. And thank you for Dave for kind of talking a little bit about that. I think it's just the people involved now are so fascinating. And we've got a group of people, as you know, Twitter can be a really rough place, which I'm about ready to maybe take a Twitter vacation for the rest of my life. But you can get in there and get involved with some things and be kind of bullied and intimidated by people that can hide behind social media. But I mean, what do you see? What do you think about UFO Twitter? Is that a useful place to spend your time? And if it is, what are some things that people should be aware of when they are engaging with that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been kind of a transition. I was using Facebook, and I really did like Facebook's ability to create lengthy posts where you could create a paragraph and develop an idea if you wanted, or you could, post two sentences. And it was easy to find that material. You could put it into a page or a group, and the material was like always right there. And then, eventually I kind of got lured into doing the Twitter thing. I tried not to for a long time because how many social media apps do we need? I mean, you can kind of develop this thing where, and I think they want us to do this where, 90% of our lifetimes is spent looking down at our devices,
Right.
trying to see what's the reaction is to what you just said and that sort of thing. So that's the evil part of it. These algorithms that have studied our behavior, and they found that applications like Twitter, that's what it does. It basically makes us want to keep looking down, and then they feed us the advertising when we do look down. So you have to be aware of that, and the things that we're posting out there in these applications and these networks are being used demographically to feed us material that hopefully will make us spend our money. So that's the reality of it. Twitter, UFO Twitter it's the Wild West. It really is. I mean, it is crazy that there's these groups that go from one end of the spectrum to the other. How anyone could actually go there and figure it out, good luck, because it's going to take you a long time to figure out who the players are and who you should mute or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is just to as you navigate through that swamp, if there's things that you find disgusting, or you find statements that are insulting to your intelligence, just click that mute button and like say, okay, you know what, I don't want to hear that. I don't have to hear that, because this is a huge crowd of people that I'm walking into, like a stadium full of people that I can just walk around to find groups of people that I can have a conversation with about, say, ufology, and talk about this subject, and talk about what's going on with the hearings, talk about what's going on in the latest cases, and try to, what's your idea, what this could be. I mean, that's what I'm interested in, is the conversation. So.
Right, absolutely. And I am too. And I find that for me, it's much healthier if I'm having a conversation on the phone with somebody.
Yeah.
Instead of wasting my time, because you do get, you get very emotional, I think, sometimes, and people know how to play on your triggers, or whoever they are, I mean, it's so to me, I understand the importance of it, but for me, I have to stay away from it, because I don't think it's a good thing for me personally.
Well, it's really interesting in the development of our language that we've kind of, in essence, devolved a little bit into using the written word or the text to communicate, because really just a simple inflection of a word, or how we pronounce something, or just the tonality of our voices when we talk to each other implies so much, especially if we're in person. It's even better. But, we remove all that, then the same sentence comes off as being, somebody's like basically disrespecting you in a way, like, and you're like, and then you reply, and it kind of, goes into a cycle of like name calling. And, we see that all the time on Twitter. I'm always like going through these conversations that, started out civil, and now it's like people are like blasting each other, when perhaps, as you said, if you had a phone call, these same people would have never done that.
Well, it is interesting, because I had mentioned, I don't know, a few months ago, something about UFO Twitter and my concerns about it. And I know Alien Girl, who's in here, and who always gets into my shows, and I appreciate her very much, but just saying that she thinks that UFO Twitter is one of the most important advocacy groups in the disclosure movement. And I had posted something, and I don't, I mean, I think that's an important comment, and I understand what you're saying. But for me, when I've gone in there, I've been immediately attacked by some pretty interesting trolls trying to get my opinion out there. And I had one conversation with somebody who was, jumping down my throat, and I said, "Hey, I don't know who you are, but give me your phone number, because I'm going to call you." And I called him, and I spent an hour talking with him. And even though that wouldn't be my typical response, I did. And I actually had a very nice conversation with him. And at the end of that, we kind of both learned a lesson, that it's like, hey, it's really easy to go out there and when somebody's making a statement about something, to jump in there, because you feel like you're a part of a movement that needs to defend and protect disclosure, but in actuality, you're not really understanding where a certain person's coming from. So, I think there are lessons learned, on all sides of that.
There are, I think, soldiers. I call them soldiers. So soldiers for various individuals and various causes and ideas in UFO Twitter. So if you are unaware of that, and you go out and make a statement that say your personal opinion, say that Lou Elizondo is an operative that's planted there, that's conducting counterintelligence on the public, I think all these people are going to jump on you. If you didn't know that existed, you're going to be shouted down and attacked, and because there's people that are on both sides of it, and you have the people that are going to be the soldiers that are for him, and then the against. It's going to create this huge war, really. I mean, so again, be forewarned, right? I mean, most people here, I think, in this group and on the show know that, because they're probably already on UFO Twitter.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just want to say there's a new figure. I've got to just show the little dino beaver who's making his appearance on Twitter and questioning people. And I just think it's really funny. So I will look forward to seeing what Dino Beaver has to say.
I am been trying to read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. It's like okay, where's the Audible? Where's Scribe? I need to like listen to this in my car. Like, oh, sorry, that's not available. And I'm like, oh, great. So then I'm trying to figure out how I can get an app to read it to me while I'm like driving because I just don't have time to sit there and pay. I mean, it's kind of sad that we can't read a book now, but we don't have time to turn the page.
Said, there's something. The book on audio is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've read more books. I've listened to more books in the last year than I've ever. I say I read. I read that book. Oh yeah, well you just listen to it while you're walking around the house making breakfast.
Well, it works. That's okay. It's at least you're, ingesting knowledge.
Yeah, my mom's an author and she hates that. She hated ebooks. She likes the books. I had to move them. There were like 3,000 of them in her apartment, so I know. But I kind of like the trend that we're able to digest this information now without having to stop what we're doing. We can do other kind of mundane activities and then and learn this material. And I think that it's opened up books to a lot of people that may not read. They just don't like reading books, but then they will listen. So.
Well, and I mean, definitely, unfortunately, and I just look at some of the books that I'm fortunate enough to have, and it is a sad thing to know that bookstores, mom and pop bookstores, are closing up all over the country, and that we won't have a piece of paper to thumb through. I love. There's something very romantic about actually holding a book in my hand and being able to go through and highlight things. But then it is very. It's such a great way when you're doing other things to process information.
Yeah, and it's indelible in a way that, say, electronic mediums, if the huge EMP pulse hits us and all our electronics die, all of a sudden, we lost all of our books. All of a sudden, if we didn't have electricity and computers, we would be without all of the books. And all the people that have shunned that, but then the people that have books, and they're not going anywhere unless they, turn to dust. So.
Well, it'll be interesting. So anyway, thank you. I'm going places that I didn't expect to go, but it's just so much fun. I really love it. And I think these are important topics of conversation. So I appreciate that. And I want to just say, hey, Troubled Minds, I am coming on your show. So we need to make a point to do that. And again, Scott, Rodan, all of the people that are getting in and supporting the show. I really appreciate you guys very, very much. And Dave, you as well, because you have been very supportive of my work over the years, and I appreciate that a great deal. So let's talk about what you've been up to lately, because you've been doing some good research.
Well, what do you want to talk about?
Well, let's talk about, so you had a couple articles that have hit the USS Ronald Reagan Navy encounters, and then also, let me just go back here a little bit because I'm losing my place. But let's talk a little bit about, you've got you're writing for the Debrief now, and you've been doing some investigation on the Ronald Reagan and the encounters, and you've got witnesses that have come forward that you've done video interviews with that are pretty just mind-blowing. And then the recreations, the graphics that you have about that particular incident. It's cool. So tell me, you first learned of this encounter thanks to the help of Keith Basterfield, who is an Australian researcher and someone that I've had on the show before. I really like Keith a lot. But tell us, how did this kind of fall into your lap, and what was the process for your latest endeavor?
Yeah, a lot of the cases that I, try to investigate, or I just find out about and go, I'm going to really dig into this, just kind of fall in my lap, really. It's not like I, all of a sudden got a call from a witness from the Ronald Reagan, although that has happened. I have had witnesses call me out of the blue like that. But in this case, one of the guys that was on the Ronald Reagan in 2004 wrote an article on his own website. And most of the time he was writing, he's like an activist, like he's a peace activist, and he was involved in Occupy Wall Street and that movement, and he's like a fine arts major and so on. He wrote an article about the Ronald Reagan, which was a departure from his normal stuff on his website, soldiersforthecause.org. And I went over, Keith Basterfield told me about it. Again, I don't know how Keith found out about it, but maybe some people just are searching the internet for interesting things. I read the article and I was like, I got to talk to this guy, and I eventually got a hold of him. You know, he could have just blown me off, but eventually I got a hold of him. His name is Karl Oleszak. It's spelled like Carol, but it's a Polish name. It's pronounced Karl. So Karl Oleszak returned my call, and we eventually did an interview on Zoom, which I recorded, and we talked all about this case. I took the interview and basically put graphics to it, put imagery and video and graphics to it, and posted it up on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see that, they can go to my YouTube channel and take a look.
And it is stunning. And could we play some of the graphics and have you explain this? And I'm going to add to you. Let me add you to this stream there. And
Yeah.
hopefully this will work. But
so what you're looking at there, that's just a 3D graphic I did based on what Karl Oleszak told me about. And after talking to Karl, he introduced me to some of the other people that were involved. Namely, he had previously talked to a Navy veteran named Derek Smith. So I talked to Derek Smith, and then he told me pretty much the same story, that they saw this glowing orange object over the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan in 2003 or 4. We're pretty sure it's 2004 now, based on talking to all these guys and trying to line up the dates and so on. No one could remember the exact date. It's been, 18 years or so, and going back, they're trying to figure out what day it was. They just don't really remember exactly the date. Hopefully, as time goes on and more witnesses come forward, we'll be able to figure out when this happened, which would then allow us to maybe look at some of the logs from the ships and try to see if there's any other corroborating details that would go along with it. So far, I've talked to probably about 10 people that were on the ship that either confirmed that they saw this or they weren't really aware of it at the time they heard about it, that sort of thing. And then 5 of the people that I talked to were primary witnesses that were on the deck of the ship while this thing was hovering over it. So let me just play some of these graphics I did. We can talk a little bit about what they are. So this is sort of a, see here, if I can get that to play. Yeah, so that is basically showing how this is not the moon or whatever. This is actually floating over the ship. In 3D, we can see that it was kind of over the bow, the front end of the aircraft carrier, over where the catapults are that they would launch the jet fighters from. And there's actually a jet fighter sitting there with its landing lights flashing. They thought that maybe this object was about the size of a jet fighter, kind of oval. A couple of the other guys thought that it might have been more round shape. Over time, I kind of developed the shape of this based on all of these witnesses helping me. I would send the graphic to them, and then I would say, is this what it looked like? And then they would go, no, it looked more like that. And, as time went on, it was sort of like, wow, it kind of looked like the surface of the sun. When you see like a close-up of the sun in a video on Discovery Channel or something. And, if I didn't tell you, it'd be like, oh, that's a picture of the close-up of the sun. But they said it kind of looked like that. The surface of this object was sort of boiling or like plasma-like, and the edges maybe weren't as, defined as I have it here. They thought the edges were a little more fuzzy looking. Like some of them were like, I didn't know it was like a gas or something, I didn't know what it was. They found it hard to describe. So that is kind of what it looked like. Now, I'll show you this one. This is sort of what Karl saw, because he was on the bridge of the ship looking out as the quartermaster, the navigator on the USS Ronald Reagan. He would have been seated on the bridge, which was about 50 feet up in the air. And, his vantage point would have been more akin to this view, looking directly out. He said eye level. He was, looking at this thing, which is pretty crazy. Here's another shot that I did that was sort of like, oh, he's on the ship looking at looking out towards the front. And he was like, the officers were just kind of ignoring it. And as an enlisted crewman, he can't really basically question the officers. He said if it's a problem to them, then it's a problem. If it's, if they tell me it's a problem, it's a problem. Otherwise, he just like does his job and doesn't like, say anything because they're not freaking out. It must be okay. That's kind of what he said. One of the other guys, Derek Smith, that I talked to was outside, and he said that, see if I can find a clip here from the outside. This is a good one here. I'm show you this one. Oops. So he's up on the outside of the bridge as a lookout. They hang out outside looking for everything that's in the ocean and the sky, and they report this as a means of security of the ship. So he comes walking out with a girl he was with, and they're like, "What is that?" Of course, he was using more like explicit language as a sailor might use, but I'm not
Yes,
going
I think I captured that in your video interview.
Yeah, I did, especially in the one that I just released on Medium. Like I played his entire soundbite to Carl Oleshak, and I kind of prefaced it. This is the uncensored version of what he said. But so if you can imagine, that's sort of like what these two sailors saw. They were looking up, and they looked down at the deck, and they said there were airmen on the deck. So they looked down, and these guys were looking up at this thing, and that's what drew their attention to it initially. The people on the deck, they said, were looking up at it, and they looked up and saw it. The girl actually told me that she saw some of these guys like running away from it. She had the impression that it was over their heads, and they sort of were reacting to it and getting out from under it, like that they were scared. She was the only person that mentioned that, but again, these are all different perspectives of the same event. See what some of the other views I have here for you. I'll just kind of give you this. This is a graphic right here that I did that shows about how high up in the air the bridge is and where these people were standing. So that's like 50 feet or so up above the deck, and of course that's still much higher above the ocean waves, but pretty good vantage point looking forward on the aircraft carrier. Here's a shot that kind of looks down the deck of the aircraft carrier towards it, and then you can see the F-18 fighter jets that were sitting on the deck there. What else do we have? This is a shot from the bridge, maybe what it might have appeared to look like from the USS Ronald Reagan, of the people looking out from the bridge, and then outside on the rails with the watchstanders that were the lookouts looking out at it. Here's another one. I took real footage. These were real clips of naval activity, mostly during the day, and then in these cases I inserted the graphics behind it. So those are real hands grabbing some binoculars. Here's some real guys looking out from the bridge. It's not the best key job, but you get the idea. So that's kind of how I illustrated the interview that I did with Carl Oleshak, by letting him talk, and he would describe these scenes, and then by using the visual, it becomes so much more impactful.
And the amazing thing is, you kind of pointed out, it was business as usual for everyone else. And so was this some sort of technology that was being tested? Was this a mistaken, identity of something more mundane? Why would there be such a lack of reaction from people when there could potentially be a threat in the area?
Yeah, I mean, when I first brought that up to Carl Oleshak, the first thing he said, is that he always thought it was sort of like the Emperor's New Clothes fable. And I put that in the story because it's kind of, illustrative to what he was talking about, that, in that story, somebody sells the Emperor the newest style of clothes, but they're invisible, so you can't see him, and they dress the emperor in the invisible clothes, and then he goes out into the city, and all of the people in the town have to pretend that the emperor has like these great new futuristic invisible clothes, but of course, it's not really true, and everyone's just sort of ignoring the fact that the guy's naked. That's the story. So Carl said that people on the bridge were acting like nothing's really going on, and it's just an everyday thing, and business as usual. There's no general quarters being called, and people have seen this article, and they're saying that there is no way, man, there is no way that would go down that way. They would not be launching any planes if this thing was really there. So there's got to be something about this. This is not right. Maybe this was some type of test of some weapon system, something like that. The witnesses themselves say, look, you have to realize that we're all working 16-hour days, 4 hours sleep, we're running on fumes, day after day after day. The workload of an enlisted sailor in these departments is never ending. Like, if the officers are not reacting to it, they're not reacting to it, it just becomes like, hey, look at that, okay, what's the next thing I have to do? I'm going to go get some chow or whatever. And I could see it in a way that if it was sort of like ignored by everybody, that everyone else ignored it. That's one kind of theory that's been put forward. Carl said we didn't have any technology like this, that he would have known about it if we did have something or if it was a test going on. Derek Smith said there was nothing on the deck of the aircraft carrier that was projecting this into the sky. He would have seen it because he was on watch looking at the deck. He didn't see anything that could be like the source of it. The witnesses said this thing made these maneuvers and then shot off into the sky at a high rate of speed till they couldn't see it anymore. Some of them talked about talking to tactical operations on the headsets, that they were asked about its position and where it was relative to the flight deck, and somebody said that it was on radar. Could it have been some type of U.S. technology? Of course. Could it have been a natural phenomenon? Carl thought that maybe it was some unknown phenomena that eventually we'd find out the answer of what it was. Ball lightning, laser-induced plasma, countermeasure systems for anti-missile technology. Again, I've kind of tried to look at these things, and if you read my article, you can see that I kind of list them one by one. And I'm not sure. I mean, some I leave on the table and say, yeah, could this be a secret technology? Of course, maybe that's what it was. But a lot of the prosaic, explanations don't fit all of the evidence, especially the idea that the thing did some kind of maneuvering and then shot off into the distance. That kind of precludes some types of technology that we're talking about here. So that's where I am right now as far as trying to come up with a prosaic explanation for it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that is quite interesting, though. Again, just the lack of response of people that are viewing this, and you would. So who knows at the end of the day? But knowing you will keep on it and keep trying to find more information out, get more witnesses to come forward, and things. And that's one thing I always loved about your work and respected about it. It's like you're not willing just to sit back and say, okay, this is what it is, case closed. I'm going to gather more evidence and I'm going to put this out there and then see what happens. And that's the way I think things should be done. So I appreciate that about you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I look at this as a mystery, and I do respect science and the empirical method. Investigations can look at mysteries and say, let's try to figure this out and come up with an answer, because sometimes what we might perceive is something that is paranormal or mystical in a way. If we apply the rigors of investigation and science, eventually we might come to know an answer that we have not discovered yet. And I think if we put enough minds on it, we think about it, and we work really hard on it, we might be able to figure it out.
And so why is it just the Navy? I had somebody in chat earlier that was mentioning, it just seems to be all of these things are happening with Navy personnel, and you don't really hear anything from the Army and things. Why would you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I first started looking at this case, what sort of caught my eye was, okay, what are some of the other cases that have reported this type of shape and object? Some of the first ones I came to were from Barry Greenwood's book, and I remembered looking at that book, and I went back to it, and I emailed Barry, and I said, "This really looks like what was described at Loring in the 1970s. And Loring Air Force Base in Maine had an encounter in a nuclear storage area where some crewmen were on the ground and they spotted this thing looked like basically what you're looking there on the screen that was hovering near one of the nuclear storage areas. And then even in the congressional open hearings last week, or earlier this week, sorry, that they said that had they heard about the Maelstrom Air Force Base incursions where an alleged UAP had hovered over the base and shut down some of the Minuteman missiles. Well, the object that was described by those crewmen and guards on the surface looked like this. So is something like this related to nuclear weapons? Is it related to nuclear power reactors in some way? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, that could be one correlative, data point, I guess you'd say, that, hey, these glowing orange orb things show up over vessels that have nuclear reactors, or they show up over weapon storage areas or nuclear missile batteries. And again, it's just me pointing that out. I think that these orbs have been seen all over the world by many different groups of people, and probably merchant seamen have probably seen these things, cargo container vessels. It's just unreported. I bet you there's other ships out there that have seen these types of things, not just Navy.
And it is interesting. I have a friend of mine who I've interviewed on the show who was actually out at, he was meeting a friend at the Great Salt Lake. His friend was a brine fisherman, and he was headed out there on the salt bed and saw what he at first thought was a kind of a glowing campfire, and then he got closer and closer to this object, and it kind of lifted up off the ground and moved towards his car, and then broke off into two separate objects that were right up against his car. And I remember him recounting this on UFO Classified, and that was years ago, and that still was quite a traumatic experience for him. And he was in the military, so interesting things. And you mentioned that you reached out to Barry Greenwood, and he's such a great source of information for things. And I spoke with Jim Klotz, and he had done great work with Bob Salas about a very similar sighting. And so what do you make of some of the footage that has been released about different drone swarms that we've seen over the past few years?
Well, specifically, there's been some video released that relates back to the 2019 Southern California operations ranges, where the Nimitz encounters happen in that same, real estate out there off the coast of San Diego. And back in 2020, I began investigating that case. And at that time, I called it the Uss Kid Incident, because the first vessel that I found out that had these drones swarming the ship was the USS Kid. As I kind of developed the case and found out that there were a lot of other vessels there, and we began receiving the deck logs, we found out that numerous destroyers were reporting they were reporting UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAS, unmanned aerial systems. They were reporting drones. They were reporting red lights, flashing red lights, white lights, unidentified drones. So they were using all this terminology to describe essentially small objects that were flying around that were brightly lit. Now, I don't know. I personally don't think that the the sailors that were writing the logs knew exactly what these things were. I never saw any indication they heard the sound of a drone, like a buzzing rotor type sound. They never said they saw these close up where they could make out, the arms and the props of the helicopter, the rotors of the helicopter or multi-rotors of the drones. So I think they just wrote it in the logs because they didn't know what else to write. At that time, I don't think you're going to write UFO in your Navy log, and the officers probably wouldn't let them, so they were instructed to write UAS, UAV, drone, because they didn't know what they were. So that happened in, a dozen or so warships over the course of July 2019. So a year later, I think it was in 2021, all of a sudden, all of this video comes out on the network, on Mystery Wire, on Instagram, and so on, that shows what allegedly are these objects. And initially, I think some of the first stuff that was released had a triangle shape, and the story was that the sailors said that that was the shape of these objects. They were not drones; they were UAPs, and they were pyramidal shaped, so that the video that was released was showing these objects was really what they were. I, from the very beginning, thought that the camera was out of focus, that the objects might have been more point source of lights, just like what the sailors might have seen would just be a light in the sky that's flashing. It might be close by, 100 feet away or something, but I don't know that they could actually discern the shape of it. But then looking at it through the camera system, it would create that optical artifact that would produce the triangle-shaped, out of focus as a byproduct of that. So I do think that those were unknown objects in those videos. Then the video of the Omaha, same thing. I think that those were, from that event that I described earlier.
Interesting. And do you remember some of the drone swarms that were being seen over the Midwest?
Can you repeat that?
Well, I remember seeing some videos that made their way to YouTube, and there were these unknown drone swarms that were seen over a couple states.
Yeah, in 2019, there were reported drones in Colorado and Nebraska,
Yep.
and they were kind of like the Colorado and Nebraska mystery drones, and it was around December of 2019, so it would have been, not that far away from the July event, and the residents there in some of these really remote rural areas would see these groups of lights approaching, and they might, be doing these patterns. And there were reports of sometimes one large, what they would call a large drone, ejecting smaller drones. And, there was an investigation that involved the FBI and the FAA and a bunch of agencies trying to track down who was flying these things, and they never found out. And some of the FOIA work still goes on today. I haven't personally been doing that, but some of the other people that are involved in that would share with me some of the FOIA stuff that shows specifically that they were looking at this as a mystery and trying to figure out, is this a foreign adversary? Because that's one of the things that in the Navy incident in July, they were concerned that this could be like Chinese drones that are conducting surveillance. So I think that the same concern was, that this was not, U.S. What were these drones doing? There was an incident, I think the same year, over the Palo Verde nuclear power system and station, where drones approached the nuclear power plant and flew over. And this is a highly restricted airspace. Like, you cannot legally fly drones over a nuclear power plant. That's like a federal crime. So, they were flying over the nuclear power plant. They were shooting lights down, like spotlights were, like high intensity spotlights were coming out of these drones over the structures within this, and the guards reported this. So that really kicked off some investigation, a much higher level, obviously, in Homeland Security and so on.
And how frightening. And you hear a lot about different drug cartels and terrorist organizations that are, using drone technology to do things like this, as you mentioned, survey and intimidate and things. And so it's really quite special that we've got all of this going on in our skies, and we're still trying to figure out if there's something extraterrestrial that's visiting planet Earth. But there's so much to move through now with the technology that we have, that we've been,
Yeah.
studying for decades, and that for some reason some people still don't think that's a possibility. That some of these things could be happening with our own technology.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's only been the last 10 years or so that we've had drones kind of proliferate. You can buy them off the shelf now at Costco. But are the things that we just discussed drones? Are these something else that's cloaking, making us perceive that these are drones so we don't, you know, take the next step and try to, I'm not sure, because sometimes if you see something and it's like, oh, that's just a drone, it's like, okay, you kind of go on your way. Whereas if it was something like this glowing, orange orb, you might go, that's not a drone. I don't know. I mean, it just seems weird. I don't know what China would be doing over Nebraska, like flying around the cornfields or whatever. I don't know.
Never say never. You never know what they could be doing, and
True.
you never know what we could be hiding.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, people say, hey, maybe that was some kind of classified system that we have that they were testing out there with special operations. They just went out in the middle of nowhere so no one would bother them to do it.
Well, and I just want to read, Logan mentions it's against the law for them to do tests on their own people. But yet you do have government officials on record saying that how are they going to test this unless it's testing on the civilian population, before they deploy this in battlefield and things. And so there's some gray areas there, and we've seen that over the years with different types of tests that have been put out there. But and recently too, I just want to say, in fact, I think it's maybe this month. Maybe some of you guys in chat can refresh my memory. But out at Dugway, they're testing drone swarms for the whole month, so that should be interesting. See how many UFO reports that generates.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, and sorry, Josh, that my voice seems to be shutting off. Hopefully it'll be clear for the rest of you. I'll try to figure out what's going on. But Steve Long wants me to ask you, can you speak more about how the story that you're talking about was originally a pyramid triangle, but now it's a ball of fire?
Well, I think that we conflated two different stories there. Maybe that's the disconnect. And the story about the 2019 incident off the coast of San Diego, these were drone swarms or unknown drones or red lights. I say that they are unknown. People, the Navy was using the term drone and UAPs and so on, or sorry, UAVs, I keep mixing that up, that were flying around these destroyers. For instance, the USS Russell, the USS Omaha, the USS Kidd, the USS Finn, the USS Rafael Peralta, all these vessels, the same thing, these drones were flying over them. Some of the sailors took videos of these things with a night vision goggle, and then I guess holding a camera up to the goggle to film what the goggle was seeing in the night vision, the green kind of. And that's where the triangle videos came out, in the videos that you saw on the internet. They showed them at the briefings and so on, and they were saying that the triangle shape is from the camera itself and the lens of the camera. So that was kind of where that topic came up. Now, the USS Ronald Reagan case with the aircraft carrier here that you see, these guys never reported any triangles. It was always, oops, here, let me hit that again. I'll show you the wide shot here. It was always this shape, and they reported it as being a glowing orange orb-shaped, 40-foot wide ball of fire and plasma. And all of the witnesses consistently kind of reported the same description of the object in this case. And this was 2004, the same year as the Nimitz. And I'll just throw out a little, Easter egg here on this case. We haven't figured out when it happened, but we did know that the ship left Norfolk in May, around May 24th, I think, or maybe it was a little earlier, of 2004, transited around South America and ended up in its home port of San Diego, California. And whether that event with this glowing orb happened during that is still a mystery. I found out that the Black Aces, the legendary VFA 41 Black Aces of Commander Fravor and Commander Slate that flew off of the USS Nimitz, actually embarked about a quarter of their squadron on the Reagan for that transit. And so a bunch of the squadron from the Black Aces was on this ship when it left Norfolk in May of 2004. I don't know if Commander Fravor was on the vessel when that happened, or if this orb thing showed up during that. I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine that Commander Fravor and these aviators were on the Reagan when it went around and saw this orb? I don't know if that's true, but it's just an interesting thing. The squadron was on the ship there, though.
Wow, fascinating. I just have to say that, I'm looking at the chat, and of course, everybody in chat always they have great comments. But, again, Logan is hoping that the days of testing on our own citizens is over. And I would have to say, unfortunately, I highly doubt it. But who knows? So could they have been, potentially just testing to see how people would be reacting in a wartime situation?
I thought, maybe the way that people were reacting to this thing was as a result of this thing. I asked Patrick Goki, one of the witnesses, if he felt different afterwards, and he thought that his worldview was changed. Like, he felt that his entire perception of the Earth and our place in it changed after this experience. Same thing with Carl Olashak. He said that the trajectory of his life changed, and they said, well, could it be possible that the reason why we became so opposed to war and destruction and conflict like that was a direct result of this? And, it's an interesting thing to bring up, to say, hey, if after this day, the direction of your life changes away from being, obviously involved in war to anti-war. Was there something that happened there? We've heard stories of people that have had encounters with these objects that their lives change and that they feel that there was some type of direct communication. Now, I know I'm kind of going out there in the woo factor with that idea, but has been reported,
Well, and that is true. And I know, from my perspective, when I had, experienced things that now I could maybe potentially explain, it's like my life did go on a certain path, and here we are now. And things. And so it does, when you think you're potentially being visited by another life form, you can go all sorts of places and have experiences, and whether that's a real tangible thing and that is based in reality is another question. But so with Carl, so he is a peace protester. Tell us more about some of the things that he's involved with now.
Well, I believe that Carl is going back for his master's degree in fine art, in philosophy, and poetry. So he wants to be an author. He wants to write poetry, which is pretty interesting for a Navy veteran to go back to school to study that. He's an immigrant from Poland. I think he came to the United States when he was very young and served his new country and so on, which I truly respect that. And then after he was involved in the Gulf Wars and so on, and left the Navy. He ended up, I think, in the Navy Reserves after his stint in the Navy. And then after that, he kind of changed direction, and he ended up in the Occupy movement. And I did try to learn some about that. I knew, when it was on TV and so on. But Patrick and Carl were some of the people in the very core group that were on the front lines of that Occupy Wall Street movement, in civil disobedience and that sort of thing. So being an activist, he was like, it's sort of like, a lifestyle, he called it. So quite an interesting gent. He shared with me some of his poetry. I included a little bit of that in the Medium article I just posted. Yeah, so there's Carl for you.
Interesting. He does sound like just a fascinating individual. And so I wanted to say, because Amy is in chat and again posts very thoughtful questions, and one of her things that she's mentioning is, if there were people that were having experiences on deck and they are being, kind of filled with the ideas of, okay, bowing to this sacred orb and take me to your leader, and then potentially not being ready to fulfill their duties if they were under attack, that could be a potential really grave error in the state of readiness.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty crazy if there was something that could sort of hypnotize people. Could this be like sort of a sentinel that comes down and is observing if they are able to do this to an entire crew of an aircraft carrier, so that they lower their defenses? I mean, that's a pretty scary idea, if that was kind of what this is a testing of so much. Now, I don't think that anything happened. None of these people reported that bad things happened and airplanes blew up or anything like that. So it just seemed to fly away. And the idea that everyone was sort of hypnotized is kind of a unique thing. The other part of that was, well, they weren't. They just kind of were really busy and tired, and they didn't know what it was, and they didn't care. It wasn't hurting them, and the officers didn't write it in the logbooks because they didn't want to have to explain that to their superiors. Carl said, no one. I said, well, why didn't you guys tell the captain? He's like, the captain wouldn't have been on the bridge at that time, and no one. We've talked. He said, we talked about telling the captain. No one ever wanted to go tell the captain. He's like, I'm like, okay. So, you have this weird thing, just no one told him. Apparently, that's what they said. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of troubling that you have a warship like this and something like this went down and they didn't go to general quarters at least.
Well, and it does bring up, I mean, I think we've all heard stories of how they're using, the voice of God and different sorts of psychological warfare in areas of battle. And so who knows what a country could be doing with regard to holographic technology, putting, the use of propaganda, different things to create some sort of religious experience or what have you for the purposes of defeating an enemy.
There is, speculation that there was sort of, I guess you would say, plasma devices that were created in the late 90s. I did find some of that on the internet that discussed proton beams that were being used to induce plasmas that could be projected into the air for various usage, for instance, for spoofing radars. And, other uses. I mean, I'm sure that the spooks could dream up lots of things they could do with that type of technology. So, was this some system that the Navy was testing out? And I don't know about the voice of God. No one reported that. I mean, Carl thought that the object, when he looked at the surface, I'll show you another rendering. This is one of the first ones I did. He said that the biblical story of the burning bush came to mind, the way that he learned it when he was a kid, unburnt energy, and what Moses saw and how the church presented that story. He thought that he was looking at like the same type of technology that would have been the biblical story, the burning bush, of unburnt energy. Kind of an interesting take on it.
And that is an interesting take, and that brings up a whole other slew of questions. You've got people who are, because of their own belief systems, are placing a value on a specific sighting, whether that's real or not. But I mean, now I mean, obviously now and forever, we've had people in the UFO community who are equating some of these types of sightings with a religious experience, and it's a god, or demons, or angels, or what have you. I mean, what are your personal beliefs with regard to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that stuff. In fact, a lot of the times when I'm presenting these, stories and witness testimonies, people will pitch in that this is they'll quote scripture and talk about Bible verses and stuff and say it as an explanation. I mean, when Carl said it, he wasn't attributing this to any kind of biblical thing other than the fact that the surface looked like what he remembered how they described that, like, so it was sort of more of a visual reference to him. But I do get that. Personally, I don't have any take on it. I mean, I look at it more, I think, from an analytical position of what is this? It looks like a mysterious object that is glowing in orange. What could that possibly be? I don't know. I'm not jumping to church dogma or something like that that would potentially show an explanation from one religious text to another. So,
And thank you, because it is interesting to see how many places people go, with this, when we should be looking at this from or should we be looking at this from a more grounded and scientific approach? Or, I mean, do we go down the route of thinking this is a mystical experience, and, where do we go off the rails with some of this?
there's problems to it because while even with this specific sighting, I've had both the mystical side of it saying that these were like angels, people coming to me saying this is specifically a type of angel that might be mentioned in the Bible or something, to just the opposite, that this is harbingers of Satan and these are demons. And you know, while I totally truly accept everyone's right to their belief system and everything, it's when it's harped on, and then when it's like, everyone needs to take cover because the demons are coming or whatever. I'm like, okay, as long you can post that on my video, but if you keep posting it like every 2 days, I'm gonna delete it.
Oh, come
I'm
on.
sorry. I get your point, but
I mean, it is interesting because, again, you've got, these people, and I mean, there's, one particular person who posts video after video after video. Well, actually, there's more than one person, and this is, oh, look at this, and this is God, and angels, and, I'm being visited, and I have superpowers, and, it's like, okay, and there's a huge cult following as a result of some of this. And I mean, half the time I'm just like, okay, maybe tonight I'm just going to go stand outside and just videotape whatever I'm videotaping. And I bet I could go post that online and have a cult following, within a matter of 5 minutes. But it's like,
yeah, I mean, that is so true. There's so much jumping to conclusions, and I mean, there's highly educated individuals that send me stuff that I'm like, you videotaped a fly, or you're videotaping birds or whatever on your security camera, but they just cannot accept it. It's like there's cognitive dissonance, I guess that's the term, where there's this. You are not going to listen to anybody tell you that these are not hypersonic drones, and I see that, and I don't know what else to tell people. I mean, I could say, hey, we could come down there and spend thousands of dollars and set up scientific instruments, but in the end, it's going to turn out to be flies or birds,
well, I mean, and like I said, I mean, I've made mistakes like that of thinking that, okay, I might be viewing A, B, C, and D. And then the more I learn, the more I'm like, no, this was mundane. It's okay. Life is good. And that's why you train yourself, and you understand the lay of the land and where you are. If you're out conducting an investigation, near Dugway, well, chances are you just might come across our own technology. Call me crazy, but
I still wanted to film a UFO. I mean, when my mom lived in Gulf Breeze, I had the camera, and I was like, I had a telescope. I was filming the telescope with a camera, they got some amazing footage. I was like, this is unbelievable footage of like a UFO. And the first MUFON guy I showed it to go, oh, those are flares being dropped from, a airplane from Eglin Air Force Base directly in the, like, 20 miles from where you were standing in the exact same direction. And I'm like, oh. So that kind of thing, filming. I even here outside a couple of years ago, I had my camera. I filmed. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. I got my iPhone out, and I'm like, what is that orange orb over the trees over there? Really mysterious looking. And then my buddy came over to drop something off, and I was like, hey man, I thought I got a really cool shot of like a weird light in the sky. And he goes, oh yeah, that was like a wedding ceremony over there. They were launching those Chinese lanterns. Like he knew that happened. But if no one told me, I would have thought, wow,
Right.
these glowing orange things over the trees were really mysterious. The other thing that gets me is and I'm sure other people the same thing, when they have those premiere spotlights that do this thing,
Yes,
and they
yes.
hit the clouds, and you see these lights going around. A couple times I stared at that for like an hour. I'm like, what the hell is that?
And then your mind goes, and it's like, it's really interesting. I remember, like, this is just really funny. We've had some interesting storms here in Utah, but last summer there was a rolling thunderstorm. And, we just don't get that typically here in Utah. And I had a friend that, called me, and he's like, go outside. You need to go outside and just check this out and stuff. And it's like, I stood out there, of course, under a metal door frame. I should have just grabbed a metal chair and an umbrella and called it good. But, just listening to this, and it was like, it was so surreal that I could understand how for a brief moment, somebody who hadn't observed anything like this could be like, okay, what's happening now? Are they testing something? Are, the gates of hell opening up? Am I going to be swallowed in an abyss? Or, all of these things. So it's just really
Oh,
fascinating. But
I mean, I love debunking myself. I installed a security camera, and then it would like record, movement. So one night, like after I first installed it, I played it back, and it had like all these crazy looking spider web like things that went like all around. And I found, like, I went back and checked the time, and then I looked at I don't even know why I did this, but I looked at the humidity and the temperature, and I figured out that the exact moment it reached the dew point. And so as soon as that temperature hit, all the dew in the air came out, all the mist in the air came out in front of the sensors, and like created that pattern.
how cool.
I mean, I debunked myself.
You still have that footage?
I think I still have it, yeah.
That would be actually really cool to see.
I'll send it to you. It's crazy looking stuff. You're like, what is that's like a ghost or something.
Yeah, that would. There's a whole other can of worms. I mean, it's like, yeah, interesting stuff. I don't know, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, where do you think we're going? Do you think that we are nearing this final moment where we see disclosure, or do you think disclosure is just simply something that has been created and reinvented time and time again to give us hope? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I, think probably much bigger in the fact that, I try to conceptualize why we're here and what we are and who we are and why we're born, and when we die, where do we go? Or is that the end? And those types of questions. And I've always thought that this phenomena, like the real stuff, the unexplained stuff, is related to that same question and is related in some way to us. And I think that the phenomena is probably much closer to us than we realize. And I mean, I could be wrong. I'm just thinking that, the idea of consciousness, this film project that I was starting with Dr. Bob Davis about exploring the nature of consciousness and the connection between things like UAP and near-death experience, life after death, out-of-body experience, all of these things that have what I would say subjective evidence, but very profound subjective evidence that stretches back for a long time. And there are some very smart people that have been studying that. And I think that maybe the UAP stuff is related to who we are in our consciousness and where we're going as a species and humanity and what is the next step. I mean, is this something where we suddenly realize that, this Earth and in our perception and our experience here on this planet is only one part of who we really are. And when we die, we don't just stop. Our consciousness is here. It's like almost like the consciousness is a projection into physical reality. And then when we die, perhaps, and leave physical reality, that our consciousness continues, and it always has continued eternally. So that, maybe UAP and these sightings of objects and glowing orbs and things like that are related to that part of who we are that we don't yet understand, or perhaps we don't remember while we're here, specifically for the reason that we are here. I mean, I know that's pretty esoteric and going pretty far out there, but I think that that would be really cool, that if we discovered that, when we die, we don't just turn into worm food and our personalities disintegrate, that we do keep going, and that UAP might be some type of technology that's coming back the other way.
Well, there are lots of questions, and I definitely don't want to be worm food myself. And I think that's human nature, to want to have a belief that there's some greater force that will come down and save us, or that when we, as my late friend Gordon Lord would say, shuffle off this mortal coil, that our spirit is moving into a different plane of existence and things. And so that's definitely, interesting questions to ask about things. And so with disclosure, again, do you feel, because for me, I mean, we've seen different advocates over the decades promoting disclosure. And Elaine Douglas, who was a UFO researcher here in Utah, used to be state director for Utah MUFON, a very interesting woman for multiple reasons. I mean, she was 20 years ago, marching in front of in the Capitol, advocating UFO disclosure. And now we've got a new group of people who are advocating UFO disclosure. And I, as much as I would, think it would be wonderful for the government to come out and say, yes, this is real. I mean, I just don't think that's ever, I hate to be a downer, but I don't think that's a possibility. At the end of the day, I really don't think that they understand if there is something here, what it is. I don't think they've had the resources, in my opinion, to properly study this. And would there, when there are so many potentials for security threats, for a defense capacity, why in the world could we or would we come out and say ET is here and visiting us?
Well, I mean, I agree with, what you said for the most part. I think my idea of disclosure is that the government is hiding something that they've been hiding for a long time, and that they have evidence that suggests that, extraterrestrial visitation has occurred. So the one problem I have with that is that that's pigeonholing this entire phenomena into that hypothesis, that there's some type of craft that was recovered by our government, and that they have this knowledge and evidence of what that is. They have the physical material that they're reverse engineering and they're hiding it. Perhaps it was from Roswell or something like that. Of course, I don't have any evidence of that. So for me to jump to that idea that the government does possibly have something like that they're hiding, I really just don't have an opinion on it, because there's no evidence that I see that they do. People would point to the Wilson Davis memo and said that's pretty good evidence that suggests that perhaps they're hiding this, that this really did occur, and that Admiral Wilson was barred from getting the information. I think that maybe the government doesn't have a clue. that they're no closer to understanding this than you or me.
I
And
would agree.
that's one of the reasons that I do this research, is because I'm like, they're not doing it. Obviously, I mean, I've never heard the government talk about the USS Ronald Reagan case or some of these other cases, not because they don't want to know about it, but just they didn't really care. And I don't think they were studying it. And if they do have information on UFOs, I think we might find out that it's just like they don't really know. They took a bunch of witness statements just like I do, and they don't have an explanation. They're no closer to it. Do our space-based radar systems and our space-based observation and so on, is there evidence of anomalous activity in space? I think there probably is. I think NASA and now the Space Force probably does have great radar and visual evidence of anomalous things flying through the skies. Do they know what it is? I don't think they do.
Well,
I mean,
I'm sure Elon Musk does. Mr. Space Boy. We're looking at creating hotels in space and commercializing space and all of these things. You would definitely think some of those people would have a handle on something that could potentially derail, billion-dollar project. I would
yeah.
but call me crazy. But again, I think for me personally, I don't believe the government has that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, again, I want to go back to kind of talking about the cast of characters who we've seen decade after decade talk about, oh, we've got crashed saucers, and oh, we're going to take you to this field and show you this, and all of these things. And you go back to some of the questionable origin stories of all of this, and it is questionable. And then you've got Bigelow and crew. Oh, yes, we are building this, multi-million-dollar place to test crashed saucers, and great, that works out for us in our commercial portfolio. But I mean, and then we've got discs, and then no, we don't. And it's just this back and forth game that a certain group of people is playing, not necessarily, in my opinion, our government.
Right. I mean, when you look at Stephen Greenstreet's kind of, I guess, 180 that you would see over the last, few years from him, actually kind of promoting and being a person that was positive about some of this stuff. I guess just more supportive, I guess, of Lou Elizondo and Bigelow and so on, to somebody that is openly mocking it as a debacle about, goblins and so on. I think that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Perhaps Bigelow is honestly curious and honestly wants to find the answers to this stuff. And the way that they created that contract and got the funds were, honestly, they weren't trying to commit fraud. They were trying to figure out a way that they could put in a mechanism to go out there and start studying this stuff. And, so he could bring in some scientists and apply rigorous investigation. Now, what if you go, I'm going to go and investigate Skinwalker Ranch and set up a team of scientists and study it. If it's your own money, I guess that's okay. If you do it kind of secretively, that under the auspices of something else, and then people find out about it, there's going to be a problem there, because you'd be like, no one said that you guys could go, study dino beavers or whatever with our money, and you hid that from us under the auspices of these Defense Information Research Document things that you were doing, advanced far-term aerospace threat research, but you were studying this other stuff and didn't tell us. There's kind of a problem with that politically, but maybe they did have good intentions, and they, what I mean? They weren't just, I don't know. Yeah,
I know it's a question I grapple with on a, moment by moment basis in my world, because, I think I've done more digging into this than anybody on the planet, and it's like, I will definitely say, as I said on, as I say publicly all the time, I think that Skinwalker Ranch was a ruse, a carefully crafted narrative, and a lot of people have profited off of it. And at the end of the day, when you look at the lack of any scientific study or equipment that was on the ranch during the Bigelow days, you have to just say, Okay, that's really odd. So could it be a grift and a complete fraudulent waste of taxpayer dollars? My bet would be yes, that's what happened at Skinwalker Ranch. And I think now
Hmm.
we're seeing the continuation of the grift to make a TV show, which I have to admit I watch every episode because it's like I can't stop watching the show.
Right? Are they going to find the gold at Oak Island?
Yeah,
That's
I
the
mean,
show.
it's like
That's
they're dropping water bottles out of planes today, and oh my God, they're making these
like
diagrams.
they're going to find the evidence, like the
Well,
next
I just
show.
like, keep thinking it's like, oh my Lord, here we've got, this, behind the scenes, we're here in Grandpa Joe's garage with all of his little gadgets, and, the strip lighting that you get at Home Depot to make this thing. And that my favorite thing, and thank you for letting me vent. I just feel so good sometimes. But then, you've got the backdrop of all the TV monitors and the steward of the ranch and his carefully posed.
I call it the paranormal hobby, the paranormal hobby shack. Although Brandon Fugel does, I don't know if I kind of say, hey, where's the green LEDs underneath your desk in the paranormal hobby shack? Oh, you mean the headquarters, whatever, the scientific command center or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does. I kind of frighten me on multiple levels, but it is fun to. I don't know if it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you really look at the history of Skinwalker, you can find plenty of evidence that suggests that, you know, there might not be anything going on since the days of the Shermans, right? Like, if you look at some of the statements of the guards, like the guard anonymously called Chip,
Yeah.
that person that was on, I think, Paracast.
Hmm.
I remember I transcribed that. I was like, oh my God, this guy is like telling it how it is, how they didn't have any money. They, like, Bigelow made them, like, they couldn't even take an airplane, to fly in from Vegas. They had to drive. They had to buy their own, like, camera because the little camera was broken, and everything was in disarray, and no scientists showed up. And when they did show up, they just basically sat around there because they had to, like, log in that they were there to collect their paycheck. That's what he said.
Excuse me.
Oh,
It's
you had a doggy.
animal and mayhem around here. I've got Mufasa, my big orange cat, who's not made an appearance on the show, and he's sitting by the door. There are people.
Uh-oh, I hear a ruckus.
Yep, here we go. It's a ruckus. It's crazy town here at Luke's recording studio. But and where, yeah. So where, what? You just made a really good point, and then I got a little distracted.
Well, I just think the best people to talk about, like, Skinwalker Ranch would be these guys that were there 24 hours, as you know, like, unfortunately. But, Chris Bartell is on Twitter all the time. Anyone can talk to the guy. He's posting pictures of, his nights and days and everything there. And I'm like, how come, like, you didn't see any of this stuff? I mean, he was in tune spiritually with it. I mean, he still is. I mean, he's a very, kind of quiet guy in the way he describes the sense of awe of the land and the connection to the Native Americans and so on. So to me, that's interesting and intriguing. It says a lot about what's going on there now because he was out there by himself walking around at 3 a.m, and nothing happened to him as far as I know.
Right, and as we've all done, and nothing has happened, and it is interesting, like you said, to talk to the security guards. And I spoke with Chip. I spoke with several people that were security guards for Bass, and all of them said, "There's nothing to see here. There was nothing. That we got our paycheck, went out and did specific things, but then you've got what guard." That shall remain nameless that like to promote false stories because allegedly there was when you could get a bonus from Bigelow if the crazier a story was, then you could get a little prop on the back. It's great. Keep up the good work creating a narrative for us. And we don't actually have to work. And so it is really
Yeah.
fascinating. And like again, it's an important thing to stress is if you've got this government funding, why in the crap are you writing a book about it and posting the GPS coordinates?
Hmm.
This is a top secret paranormal study. It just doesn't, none of it adds up if you really step back and look at it from a logical perspective. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. The whole story, if you look back and you let's like go back as far as you can and read everything you can about it, with the Shermans when they were there and some of the interviews that were done with like Linda Moulton Howe and stuff, and you're like, that's where the really crazy stories like came out. But then it kind of just stops, and then after that, everything seems to be like The Secret of Oak Island, where it's like, okay, we're gonna find the next spooky thing that happened, and my phone stopped working, or this thing happened, or I felt nauseous, or I couldn't remember something, and it's attributed to this mystery that just, I don't know. I mean,
Well, all I can say is the cell reception in that area is really crappy. I don't know what to say. It'll be interesting, and perhaps when I venture up there next weekend, if I end up going, I'll have my own adventures where I can, climb through the bushes and put on my ghillie suit and get my night vision goggles and do my own little reconnaissance mission and then post video.
yeah, I remember the days when Ryan, I guess his name's Skinner, right? Like he would like climb up onto the top and then like surveil down and like crawl up to look over, when it was completely, you'd get busted for trespassing if you came anywhere near the place. But people are always trying to, a guy flew a drone over or something, they threatened him, so like.
It really is. Like I'm working on a book. I need to get back to this with a certain wonderful person, and it is on my whole account of the madness that has been my journey into Skinwalker Ranch and the cast of characters that I've come in contact with, and I think that'll be fairly fascinating when that comes out. But man, I'm telling you, I think it's a trip. It's a trippy story, and so where can people find more out about you? Where can they watch your incredible videos? I know that you've got several different places that you're posting them. You're also writing for the Debrief now as well, which is cool. And so, I mean, give us the lowdown and what is next with this investigation, your latest investigation.
Yeah, so I've been writing on medium.com, and I've only just started recently, so I've got like 3 articles up, but I think that they're pretty good articles that look at like 3 cases that I've been studying in the last several years. So if you look for my name, Dave, Beaty, Beaty, and I forget how Medium works, so like dave.beaty.medium.com, something like that. It takes you directly to the page, or you probably can just search for my name and find all those things that I'm writing about there. On YouTube, I have a channel called The Nimitz Encounters, and I've been posting everything on that same channel. So if you go there, you'll see the interview with Carl Olashak that I just posted. It's like 40 minutes long with all these graphics that we were showing tonight. I'm going to post more. I have like several other interviews with witnesses that I'm working on, and I'm going to keep adding them to that site. And then, yeah, I've been working with the crew at the Debrief, doing some really cool projects there. And I did work with a couple other gents, Craig Labadie and Sean Munger, and we created an article that is on the USS Ronald Reagan that got kicked out a couple weeks back. So you can look at that. And then if you want to hear more about the consciousness film, you can go to consciousnessfilm.info. That's the website, and there's all kinds of information about what I'm doing there.
Awesome. Okay, just one last question, because I wanted to broach this, and this is just so off topic, but this is my brain. On Friday nights, what do you think about the recent statements from Richard Dolan that Ukraine is completely corrupt? How's ever putting you on the spot right before show close?
I don't know. I mean, I on my Twitter profile, I have the Ukrainian flag next to the U.S. flag, and I've been like tweeting out every like positive thing that I see the Ukrainians doing, like as far as every time the Samson and Goliath, that Samson is like dropping a grenade on a Soviet tank or whatever. I'm posting that, tweeting that, retweeting that out, and I've been doing that since the very beginning. I mean, I'm gunning for these guys, and I'm hoping that they come through.
Absolutely. And I think that everyone here listening to the show tonight feels the same way. And I was just so, I think all the people that I know were so off put by these ridiculous comments coming from Dolan, but I suppose it shouldn't be too surprising. But thank you for just ending on that note, and thank you for a wonderful, wonderful interview. We went lots of places as we usually do, and I look forward to hearing more about your witness interviews and things. And again, thank you for your kindness and support over the years. That has meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Erica, for having me, and I appreciate that people, want to stay and listen and hear what I have to say. Obviously, sometimes I ramble on too, so.
No, I love it. It's fun. Like I said, I love Friday nights. I love the people that listen to my show and the guests that I have on. It's really a pleasure to do this. And so it's been a wonderful thing. So thank you, Dave, very much. I appreciate it. And I want to just thank Mario again and thank Peter and thank all of you who are in chat and who've donated to the show, who are Patreons and then have gotten in here and donated tonight. This really means a lot and helps with the production of the show and me unmuting my mic. Just kidding. Anyway, on that note, you guys be safe. I will catch you either next week. I will be maybe doing a live stream from Skinwalker Ranch if the paranormal vortex doesn't open up and I can actually broadcast. Who knows? But we'll see what happens. But definitely, I will be around and I'll keep you guys posted. So thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Bye.